right, so today's movie review is for the film The Guns of Navarone from 1961 from director J. Lee Thompson. He also directed the film Cape Fear from 1962 and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes in 1972. And so, some essential details about this movie. Gregory Peck, he declined to attempt an English accent in order to play his character in this movie. That's why he's the only one who speaks with an American accent. Everybody else British, for the most part. Another detail, this is the only time that David Niven, who's a very famous actor in this era, this is the only time he ever smoked cigarettes on screen because he was a lifelong non-smoker. So I think that's kind of interesting because if you watch a lot of movies in this era, there's like smoking and drinking in every other scene. So I think that's pretty awesome that back in this era, he was one of the people who didn't drink and smoke. So that's pretty cool. All right, so talking about the plot of this movie, I gave it a 3 out of 5. I thought it was okay. I thought the idea of it was really cool. This is based on a book, by the way, from 1956 or 7, I want to say. I love the idea of a gang of heroes. You know, they're wearing disguises, they're shooting guns, it's very different from a typical war movie. You know, when you think of a war movie from this era, it's like The Longest Day or like Fighting Seabees, it's like a group of soldiers, right? But these guys are kind of more, I would say more like an espionage, like a special ops type of group. So that was very different than other movies you would see. This is very much like Valkyrie or Captain America nowadays. I kind of like that aspect. I do think the film runs too long. Because it's over 2 hours and 30 minutes. And I think there's a lot of sitting and talking and planning that I really think could have been reduced a lot. Because I'm more of a fan of show, don't tell. Now, in a lot of old movies, they didn't have a lot of budget for special effects and whatnot. I just think they could have trimmed down on a lot of those scenes just to make it a little bit more flow well and more concise. Because to me, there's just a lot of sitting and talking. And I'm not going to lie, it's very boring. It's not very engaging like in other movies. If you think of a movie like Lawrence of Arabia, though, which is very different, that's a biopic and about the life of a guy. That one is very artsy and, a very different kind of story than this one. This one just seems like you're an average action movie. So that's why I gave it a 3 out of 5. I think it could have been a lot shorter and a lot more tight and concise. All right, so now let's move on to acting. Acting, I gave it a 4 out of 5. Thought it had a stellar cast. And I love David Niven and Gregory Peck. I thought they were the best. This movie, I was mentioning earlier, those other ones. It's a lot like Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, even Avengers, where there's a lot of characters, a dynamic cast, whatnot, and a lot going on with them. I even liked, it's a funny thing to say, but I liked the Nazi actors too, because they were great villains, and I love that they were speaking German. So this is very realistic to a World War II. I love that. I thought that was a really nice touch to it that I think a lot of other movies in the era wouldn't have done. So I thought that was really cool. So yeah, to me the highlight is definitely the acting in this movie. One of the highlights. All right, next is directing. So directing, I give it a 3 out of 5. This is J. Lee Thompson pictured here. I thought he did good, but not super great. So I give him 3 out of 5. I wish the plot was shorter, and I thought there were a lot of exposition scenes that really could have been a lot shorter. But I loved his ideas. That's why I didn't give it like a 2 or anything like that. I thought the ideas were there, and as far as I know, this is pretty faithful to the book. So I like that too. But that's the thing, it's one of those things where like, do you want to be super faithful or do you want to be a somewhat good adaptation, right? It is what it is, but I thought the directing was just fine. I mean, the staging was good, the camera placement was good. All of that was fine. I just wish the plot was a little bit more concise. All right, next is cinematography and special effects. I gave that a 4 out of 5. I thought it looked amazing in a lot of scenes, especially in the very beginning. And when they're on the boats. And to me, the reason why I don't give it a 5 is when they actually break into the base with the Guns of Navarone and all of that. it's pretty hard to see what's going on for a good 10 to 15 minutes. And that to me kind of made it hard to pay attention as well. I wanted to be able to see more of what was going on. But I love a lot of the scenes, though, cinematography wise. You know, on the boat, like right here, very realistic. I love the explosions and the fight scenes, those were great as well. This is another highlight of the movie, is this aspect of it. So if you're a fan of explosions and stuff, you'll definitely like this movie. All right, next is the music. The music, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was good. You know, definitely a lot more fanfare, music, and made it feel more like an epic and whatnot. It just wasn't super memorable. Like Lawrence of Arabia, which just came out 2 years after this movie, super memorable, super classic. This, I think if you heard it, you'd be like, oh, that sounds like an adventure or a war movie, right? I don't think you'd be able to tell it was from this specific movie, though, if that makes sense. But again, that wasn't the main focus of a lot of movies back then. If I heard it more, maybe, but I digress. That's why I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. All right, so tallying that all up, that brings my Letterboxd score to a 3.5 out of 5, which I'll be keeping at that. And my critic list score makes that a 70%. So would I recommend this movie? I would say for the action scenes and the cast, yes. I think they're great. I think the explosions and the gunfights and all that are really, really cool. It's very much a almost like an espionage, more thriller type movie. That aspect is cool. But keep in mind there's a lot of exposition scenes that take up a lot of time and makes it a very, very much a slow burn. Again, this movie's like, what is it, like 2 hours and 40 minutes? And there were a lot of epic scale movies at this time. This movie did not need to be that. Again, I mentioned Lawrence of Arabia, Ten Commandments is another one of those. They could get away with being very long. This film does not need to be that long. All right, well, those are my thoughts on the Guns of Navarone, and that's today's movie review. And yeah, yeah, it's not a super. I would say this is not a movie I'd recommend to everybody. You kind of have to be in that niche action film kind of audience, in my opinion. All right, but anyways, that's today's film review.